Okay, so we're going to look at ways of ethically or morally criticizing this attention economy. I'm going to look at two forms of critique. One that appeals to the idea that attention merchants use problematic forms of manipulation. The other one is that the attention economy turns something into an object of mainly economic transactions that should not be treated in that way. And at that point, we're going to get to this issue about democracy again. So we'll look first at something that Wiliams says. So he says that when we look at this, the goals these technologies create for us, we observe a deep misalignment between the goals we have for ourselves and the goals that technologies have for us. So he sort of makes this nice observation that things like, look, are we, when we are on our deathbed, going to think, oh, I should have spent more time on Facebook? That's the goal Facebook has for you. Spend as much time on Facebook, scrolling randomly, like endlessly for hours. Should have watched more cat videos on YouTube, or I don't know, Britain Got Talent's cute videos, child singing. That's what the attention merchants want you to pay attention to. So he's thinking, no one really wants those things for themselves. That's not what anyone really cares about. So that's, Wiliams thinks, well, that's the problem. The goals they create for us, the goals we have, they're not really aligned. But it doesn't seem to me quite right. Just because there's a conflict of interest doesn't mean any rights are being violated. Okay. So it doesn't mean like if I want ice cream and you want waffles and we have to agree on what to cook for dinner. It's not like my ice creams, dinner, well, sorry, that's how I'm thinking. My mind is thinking ice cream or waffles. All right, so dessert, is it going to be waffles or is it going to be ice cream? If my right, there's no rights being violated if I'm not getting what I want. Okay. So why would my rights be violated if I'm not getting what I deeply care about and want? And instead Facebook gets what it wants. Mark Zuckerberg gets it. Why is that? There's no rights being violated just because two parties are in conflict. And also, I think that Wiliams is a bit sort of at times a bit sort of optimistic, or sort of he thinks, well, who knows what people will care about. Maybe at some point we will think that, oh, I wish I spent more time on Instagram. I don't know. I mean, why? That's not clear to me. So maybe that will change. And then it seems like we don't have a conflict anymore, so there wouldn't be a problem. Okay. I think we should think differently. We should think that our rights are violated because we're being manipulated. Wiliams mentioned this, but doesn't make much out of this. So I want to make more of this. And that's because our patterns of attention and our habits are pushed away from where they should be. And they're pushed in that way, not by means of rational persuasion, but through other means. Okay. So let's look a little bit about what manipulation is. What is manipulation? This is an example from Anne Barnhill in her article, What is Manipulation? So suppose your partner wants to go on a family camping trip, but you don't. While you're discussing it, your partner calls out to your children. He says, hey kids, who wants to go on a camping trip? The children cheer. You correctly judge that it's better to go on a camping trip, despite its drawbacks, than to disappoint your children. You agree to go on the camping trip. So she thinks, in this case, your partner manipulates you. Manipulates you to go to a trip that he doesn't want. And what he does is changes the situation so that now it's not about weighing the reasons for and against the camping trip anymore. It's all about managing the emotions of children. So change the background, the context, in a way that you now can't anymore weigh the reasons. So the discussion of reasons for and against the trip was on the table before. Now those reasons don't matter anymore. The children are already excited. So what she thinks manipulation is it's directly influencing someone's beliefs or desires or emotions so that they fall short of ideals for belief and desire and emotions in ways that are typically not in their self-interest and not likely in her self-interest in the present context. So not all ways of changing how someone feels about something are manipulative. You know, getting someone to feel guilty for having betrayed a friend when they have betrayed a friend is not manipulating. That's getting them to feel the way they should feel. One way Noggle puts a similar idea is that what manipulation is adjusting the psychological screws or levers away from the way they should be. Okay, you're manipulating by adjusting the way someone's mind sort of works in ways that they shouldn't be. Now, often that's by, like the way they're ideally set by the standards of the one who's doing the manipulating. But in some cases, also just by the standards that are objectively right. Now, manipulation is when you directly influence someone's desires. So, you're not manipulating someone if you're giving them drugs, for example, then they also can't decide rationally anymore. Roughly, you're manipulating with changing their psychology. So that happens in the attention case too. The companies are not drugging us. They're changing our psychology through psychological means. And it's typically not in the self-interest. Sometimes you might, affect someone in ways that is good for them. That's not necessarily manipulative. They may be paternalistic, but it's not manipulative. So, you influence someone's psychology without giving them reasons for doing something, you move away from the ideal settings of the capacities in ways that's not typically in their interest. So are they manipulating us? Now, of course, they do influence the advanced attention merchants, that is the Facebook and Google and so on. Now, of course, they do influence our beliefs, desires, and emotions. You want to click on the first link on Google. I mean, it seems the most attractive thing to click, so you want to do it. You might want to scroll through Facebook endlessly. You feel anxious when you haven't checked Instagram. And arguably, these are not ideal settings for belief, desire, and emotion. But directly, what the influence is our attention. So can that itself, influencing our attention, be manipulative? It's not clear that there are ideal normative settings for attention, so something that attention should be. If you think of attention as a resource, as an information gate in our brain. Right? But I suggested that's not really the right way of thinking about it. It's this organizational structure of our mind. And I think we can ask, what's the ideal state of that structure of our mind that organizes everything? Right? How should that evolve over time? So here's the suggestion. What we should pay attention to, it should matter what's important. So what you prioritize in your mind with your attention ideally matches what actually is important. So what's prioritized in your own world, in your own universe, as James puts it, should match what's actually of significance. Now, there are different sources of importance. Importance might be what's important to you, so it's prudential importance, what's important to the individual. There's moral importance, what matters for the common good, for us, all of us. And there's epistemic importance, what's important to know about. So learning something at school may not be something that is important for the child already. They don't care about learning certain things. Is it important for the common good? Maybe not, but it's important to know something about certain things, just because these are important facts that one should know about. When you go on a vacation with your love, that may not be important for the common good. It might not be, it's not important to know anything about this place, this island, say, but it's something that matters to you as an individual. It's important for you. And then, if there's someone who has some problem, simple or grand, where their groceries have fallen down or is suffering from a disease, that helping them will be important for the common good, even though it might not be important to you, important to know about. Now, it's often difficult to weigh what's important for the individual, what's important for the common good, and what's important to know something about. It's difficult to know exactly what's important. But I think it's clear that some things are fairly clearly not important on any of these direct dimensions. So here's then these suggestions. An influencing intention manipulative if it brings your priority structures, that is what you prioritize with your mind, into a worse alignment with what's of actual importance, and does that through these psychological direct means that don't use reason. And an influence intention is not manipulative if it brings your priority structures in a better alignment with what of actual importance. So I want to illustrate that by something that's not manipulative in my view. So, for example, you might want to. So, suppose you're a doctor, and a doctor needs to operate on a brain. It's been found that the doctors often kind of forget that this is the brain of an actual person that they're operating on. Now, one way to change their decision making is to put a picture there of the person whose brain you're operating on. Now, here, you're changing what they pay attention to. Maybe they're paying now attention to the fact that this is a real person. Now, that's not manipulative, because now you bring in, you get them to pay attention to something that is important to pay attention to when you operate on someone's brain. It is the brain of a person. Okay. But the advanced attention merchants, I suggest, they don't do that. They bring our attention structures out of line with what is the normative ideal for attention. Google makes you pay attention not to what's most important. It doesn't care about that. It just gives information that it's paid for. Google Maps directs you to places that pay for their placement. That's how they get there, not because they're the ones that you actually care about getting to. Facebook and Instagram make you pay excessive amounts of attention to how you appear to your friends, because that's how to get you to be there for a long time. Pay attention to advertisement. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they all make you pay excessive amounts of attention to petty and unimportant content, because that's easy to harvest for advertisement. So I want to suggest that these companies are systematically manipulating you because they get you to pay attention to things that are neither important for you, nor important for the common good, nor important to know something about. So they directly influence your attention so that it's far from where it ideally would be, on however way we want to understand what's important. Now, in some cases, manipulation might not be such a bad thing. It's sort of part of normal business transactions. Yeah. So this philosopher, Marcia Baron, she talks about manipulation that's not bad. So if you're buying a house, then you know that people put in an effort to make it look nice, and they maybe put some smells in the house that smells particularly good. So, yeah, in some sense, it's manipulating you. It gets you to buy the house more easily. But you know that that's happening. And so maybe that's manipulation, but it's nothing very terribly wrong with that. But here, manipulation is transparent. It's clear and predictable that this is what is happening. It's resistible. You don't have to buy the house on the spot. If you do have to, if they force you to make a decision on the spot, then I think it starts to be pretty bad. And you can kind of avoid the influence. You can kind of think about something else. I can just try to focus on the important features of the house that you care about. But as I suggested, the manipulation by the advanced attention merchants, Facebook, Google, and so on, is not transparent. You don't know how it works. It's not resistible. You can't avoid it. You have to, in order to live a normal life, you have to use those products. So I don't think there's any reason to think that there's something morally benign about it. So I do think that these attention merchants engage in this massive multi-person form of morally objectionable manipulation. So in agreement with James Wiliams, I would like to quote him, and he says, in order to do anything that matters, we must first be able to give attention to things that matter. The liberation of attention may be the defining moral and political struggle of our time. Its success is prerequisite for the success of virtually all our struggles. Okay. In the last part of the lecture, I'm now going to talk about another way in which these attention markets might be problematic. It's going to be very short, and that will be the end of this lecture.